Welcome to part 4 of how to assemble a drip irrigation system. Today we're going to share our tips on how to assemble Emitterline. Before getting started, we suggest that you watch part 1, how to assemble a drip irrigation system. Be sure and use a pressure regulator for Emitterline because it requires pressure less than 60 psi. But also it needs pressure of at least 15 psi in order to work properly. Be sure and check your water pressure first. It must have a pressure of at least 15 psi along the entire run of each Emitterline. This means that you will need 25 to 55 psi at your faucet, depending on the length of your Emitterline. Emitterline is great for areas that you want to water with a meandering line. It's good for moderate water coverage in landscaping areas such as shrubs and perennials, and it can also be used for garden beds. Emitterline is sometimes confused at first glance with polytubing. It also comes in the same sizes, 1/4 inch and 1/2 inch. Unlike polytubing that requires the addition of emitters, Emitterline already has emitters built into it to deliver water to your plants. When you look closely, you can see the small holes every 12 inches on the 1/2 inch line and every 6 inches on the 1/4 inch line. From where you connected the polytubing in video part 1, there's several ways to transition to the Emitterline. If you'll be laying your Emitterline in straight or curved lines, such as in a vegetable garden, extend your polytubing along one full edge of the garden. At the spots where you want to branch off an Emitterline, cut the polytubing and insert a power lock T so that the opposite ends reconnect the polytubing and the third end is facing in the direction of your Emitterline. As demonstrated in the drip tape assembly video, we connected the drip tape via a connector that punched into the polytubing. For the Emitterline, the way we're going to connect it to the polytubing is with the T. At the end of the Emitterline, install an end cap or an end cap with a flushable valve. If your Emitterline gets clogged, all you have to do is run water through it and then open the valve to flush it out. If you'll be laying your Emitterline in a loop, you'll need to install 2 power lock T's. The first T will cut the polytubing as we described in the previous design, but this time the side branch will also be a short length of polytubing. At the far end of this short polytubing, install another T. This second T should have one end installed into the poly and the other 2 ends of the T will fit into the 2 ends of the Emitterline to form a closed loop. If your Emitterline needs to make a sharp turn, you'll need to cut it and then install an elbow to reconnect it. When laying down your Emitterline, make sure and lay it down with the holes facing up. Emitterline sometimes is a little bit easier to work with when it's warmed up in the sun. And if you have any problems putting on the power lock ends or fittings, just use a little bit of water. To use the 1/4 inch Emitterline, follow the same principles as for the 1/2 inch Emitterline, but use 1/4 inch fittings punched into the side of the polytubing. Keep in mind when designing your system that the maximum length per run of 1/4 inch Emitterline is 18 feet. For simplicity, efficiency, and to save water, water your garden with Emitterline and grow organic for life.